There is, as we come into this time of year, I don't know if you all notice this at all, but it feels like there is this tradition, and maybe it's a stereotypical tradition, and maybe it's just among guys. Ladies, you'll have to tell me if you do this also. But where we want to get the biggest, or the brightest, or the most of things, right? Is this like, I know I'm playing to stereotypes here, but isn't this like the one time of year where every guy knows exactly how tall their ceilings are? Right? And it doesn't matter how well you know it, how well you have measured it, but at some point in time, don't you end up with a tree like this? Where you've just kind of got it all mixed up. Maybe it's not the tree that you get, but maybe it's you look at all your neighbors and the lights that they have on there, so you say, I need to get just one more light. One more light just to be a little bit brighter than all of my neighbors, and then you end up with this. My favorite part of this movie is always the part where he turns on the lights, and all of the rest of the lights in town go out until the guy at the power plant turns on the auxiliary nuclear reactor. And then it comes back on. I know that's a thing that maybe some younger generations aren't quite going to get, but back in the 80s or 90s when this movie was put out, that we were like, we cracked up. We thought that was hilarious. That it took all that power, and he's just standing there in the glow of all of the lights. We do that, don't we? If we're honest with ourselves, we all have those moments somewhere along the way where we are wanting to have the biggest or the best or the most of something. Even if it doesn't make any sense and there's no real good reason for it, we still want to have it. How many of us, if we are in process of doing this, if we are asked by someone, well, what reason do you have for this, could actually give a good reason? Right? I'm not sure that I could. We've got an example going on at home right now with Emily and I. I am in process of trying to convince her that we need to get a bigger TV. Right? Did you know, sorry, this is going to be a little bit of a sidebar, but did you know that you can go to Walmart right now and you can get a 55-inch TV for about $300? I'm looking at, I measured our TV last night, and this would be almost a whole 20 inches longer on the diagonal than the TV we have right now. And so I'm trying to talk Emily into this, and I can rationalize this all I want. But if she happens to ask me the entirely reasonable and in a tone of voice that has no judgment laced into it whatsoever, ask me the very important question of, do we really need a bigger TV? I get a little defensive. I want a bigger TV. We need a bigger TV. I'm going to kind of whine about it a little bit. I can't give you reasons for it. I just know this is something that I wanted. And part of it is because I remember back when we got our current TV. This was back long before I'd even ever met Emily. We've had it for a little while. And I remember how much I spent on this TV. Back in the day, it was like $600 or $700. And if you got any bigger than that, you were going to spend $1,000 or more because when you were a kid growing up with a little tiny square box on a little tiny TV stand, these big flat screen TVs are amazing. And I remember how much I spent on that TV versus how much these new ones cost, and I think to myself, by golly, I can do it. We can do it. We just need a bigger TV. I'm sure none of you have ever had that experience before, have you? With anything. Doesn't have to be TVs, doesn't have to be Christmas trees or Christmas lights or presents or anything like that. I'm probably the only one that has done that. It's like what happens. You ever had that thought of what a dog would do if it ever actually caught the car that it was chasing? I'm kind of in that place a little bit. And so I know the next big question that comes from this is, what does any of that have to do with Advent? Right? Is there actually a point to this, or is this just my not so subtle way of trying to convince Emily to get a bigger TV? Which, of course, she is not here to appreciate right now because she's down helping with the Christmas program. That's exactly how that would go, right? So it's kind of like this. That kind of thinking, that way of being able to imagine something different, bigger, better, more than, even if you can't put a good reason to it, but just being able to think of something out like that is something that we are really good at. as people we're really good at. And that is something that can drive us to great heights. Even if we don't know exactly what it is that we're doing or why we're doing it, it can push us into great things. I mean, this is John Kennedy's moonshot speech from back in the day, right? We didn't know how we were going to get there, didn't know what it was going to look like, didn't know how long it was going to take, but he stood out there and he said, we're going to go to the moon in the next decade. And everyone around him went, how? But okay, here we go. It can push us to great heights. It can also push us into a lot of trouble if we aren't careful. But it is the thing that separates us, that ability to think of things outside of ourselves, bigger than ourselves, even if we don't know really what it is, that separates us from the rest of the animals. I'm convinced that in the story of creation, before God creates woman and it's just the man and the animals, that this is why the man isn't happy with things. I know all of the Facebook memes out there that say a man and his dog and that's all that they need. Well, we tried that. It didn't work very well because Adam got bored after a while. He's like, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know how to do anything with this. And I think it was because the animal, they can't think of it, they don't have the ability to think of anything beyond themselves, bigger than themselves. It's something that's very unique to us and to who we are. Even if I'm not really sure what to do with a bigger TV, I can think of something bigger. Or a Christmas tree or a few more Christmas lights or whatever it is, I can think of something. I can think of reasons or something. I can imagine what that would be. So what do we do with this? Our scripture reading out of Isaiah for this morning is one of those places where I love that we start in Advent. It doesn't matter what year in the lectionary cycle we're in, we always start in Isaiah. Because Isaiah begins to kind of set the tone for us of where we're going and what we're doing. And he makes this statement, and this is in verse 2 from our reading today. He says, in days to come, the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established as the highest of the mountains, and shall be raised above the hills. All the nations shall stream to it. I'll shorten this down just a little bit to the highest mountain. That's what they were aiming for. That was their target. They wanted to be on the highest mountain. This was what Israel was looking for. And this is what God, through the prophet Isaiah, was explaining to them to get them to that place. But they were competing things going on because Israel had this idea of what they thought they wanted in getting there. They had memories of who they used to be, or better yet, of who they thought they used to be. And they wanted that back. They wanted that perceived greatness back, and they didn't really know how to get it. They just knew that it was out there, and they wanted to reach that place again. They didn't know what they were going to do with it when they got there, but by golly, they could see it. They could reach for it. They just wanted to be back up on the mountain. Their history, as they remembered it, told them that back in the day, they were a great nation, and they had great power. How much of that was actually true isn't really important to the story. That's what they remembered. In reality, Israel had never been a great world-shaking power. Very much important at different points in time, absolutely. I mean, they were right there on the edge of the Mediterranean Sea, where the water empires of like the Roman Empire and all the others that would in Egypt would base themselves around the Mediterranean Sea. They were at a great transition point from there to what we think of as the Middle East today. So at times they were very important, but they were never big. They were never the great empires that came and conquered them later, but they wanted back on that mountain. So what is God doing? We call him the prophet Isaiah because he gives us prophecy. Now, remember what a good prophecy does. Prophecy is not about predicting the future. In fact, that's about the worst thing that prophecy does, is predict the future. But prophecy is this. Prophecy explains the world around us with an intent to teach a lesson. So what is Isaiah doing? What is God doing through Isaiah? Working to put the world back into the right order so that the people of Israel could understand. Remember where we were in verse 2, that the Lord's house will be established up on the highest mountain. They wanted that because that's the high ground. That's the most important place to be. That is perceived as a place of power. But remember, that God is helping them to put their world in order. So right after verse 2, we get this in verse 3 where it says, "Many peoples shall come and say, 'Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth instruction, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem.'" What does it look like to have things in the right order? That you go up on the mountain. Not to rule over others, not to have power over others, but because that's where God is. Because that's where God will teach them what they need so that they can walk in the right paths, so that their world can be ordered in the right way. And why is that important? It's not so that they can be in charge of everything and rule over everything. That's not the goal. In this world, in this time, that's not the goal. That is worldly thinking, to try and rule and have power and dominion over others. That is the dominion of the world, because what does God need with authority over a kingdom here on earth when he is already literally God over everything else, right? But instead it's this. And this is where I love that we got Psalm 172 this morning, and that's going to follow us throughout this season of Advent. Specifically, we get verse 7. "Peace be within your walls and security within your towers." What is God giving them through all of this? Peace in their lives. Order and security, stability and a good foundation, all the things that you can't find in an unstable world. Even if we live in a world that has given all of the appearances of being stable for a very long period of time, we know that the world is going to change at some point, because that's just what it does. What do we need instead of power in this world? We need that strength and security and stability and that good foundation to make it through all of those changes. That's why later in the Old Testament and later in Isaiah, that we start to see God telling the people about the Messiah. Not because God is predicting the future, because predictions are more about what might or might not happen. It's why prophecy is really not good at predicting things, because it only tells you what might or might not happen. If someone gives you a prophecy and they said, "I'm predicting that this will happen," you can probably be pretty safe in assuming that it's not going to happen. That's not what that goes. But God is starting to tell them what will happen, what will come, telling them the future not in terms of who is going to win the next Super Bowl, but telling them what to expect. To have the peace that you are looking for, this is what is going to happen. He says, "I will send Emmanuel," not according to their expectations, because that's really not good prophecy, but according to God's. Because that is what orders the world well. As we start this season of Advent, we're in that same place. What do we really want? Or what should we really want? Peace within these walls. Not just physical walls, but it could be spiritual, mental, spiritual walls that we have, that we live inside of. We all have walls or boundaries that we live inside, but to have peace in those places, to have security and stability inside of those places, peace be in ourselves. But how do we do that? How do we get there? We go to the highest mountain, where that teaching comes. The mountain that Isaiah describes isn't the one that we're often reaching for, though. This is where the challenge comes in. This is where this is hard, is that this mountain that we're looking for is not what that we want, is not the one that is actually there. We reach for the wrong mountain when we look back to the past, like the Israelites did, to try and say, if we could just go back to the way that things were, to the way that I remember things, then it would be okay, then it would be fine. We would reach that place and the world would be right all over again. But there are very few instances when things were that much better as a whole back then. what's attractive about that is that it's something that we know. That's why we reach back to the past in those ways. It's because those are the things that we know. Those are the things that we can hold on to. And if we can go back to those things that we know, we are more comfortable and we feel as if we are in a better place. But that's not how this works. Israel wanted to go back to the mountain where they were a great nation among great nations, except that was something that only ever existed in their own minds. And the same is true for us. We remember being greater or being more powerful or more important. And some of that is even true to certain degrees. But what is always more true, whether we're talking about now or we are talking back in the times when Israel was around, is that there is always more that we don't know. There is always more that we miss. And how much of those things that we don't know or that we have missed have an even greater impact on our lives than the things that we do. So what do? Well, we go back to where the psalmist leads us, to where Isaiah is directing us. We go up to the mountain. We look for that peace within our walls. This is the peace that we will see Jesus bringing. Not to establish a great kingdom to rule all the other kingdoms here on earth, because we've just spent 2 weeks on Christ the King Sunday. When Jesus is already king of all that there is, why does he need to establish a kingdom here on earth? He's already got it. He doesn't need to do any more of that. But he can help us to find that peace. He shows us how to find that peace inside of our own walls, whether actual physical structures or whether healthy social boundaries or whether the walls we have inside of ourselves. This is what he is leading us towards. This is the hope that he is bringing into the world that the world always struggles with. How to find that peace inside of who we are. How to order our world in such a way that we can know that peace that he brings. The title for this message is called as Hope for Light. Because that's where we find ourselves on this weird first Sunday of Advent. Because at least in the United States, this is always a strange Sunday because we still have, Thanksgiving. Because I know that we probably aren't the only ones that still have leftover turkey in our fridge at home. We just this morning, it's that cold, drizzly kind of rain where it's like, well, we're almost in December. We're looking towards Christmas and it's raining? Come on, give me snow at least. I know some of you aren't happy about that, but I'd rather have that than this wet, cold rain that just seeps through everything. We're in that weird place right now where we're still kind of halfway in one season and not completely yet in the other. But what we're looking for is that hope for light. Light that will show us a new path and a new way. One that will help to order our worlds in such a way that we can handle whatever changes around us because we know where our strength lies, and it's not in the things of the world, but it is a world that has been ordered by Jesus, guiding and teaching by what he does for us and the gift of his life coming into the world. That is where we are looking and we are going in this season of Advent. So let us be a people that looks for that hope, that looks for that guiding. They can find that peace within our walls and in turn share that with others that they may also come to see it and know it. And let us do all of this in Christ's name. Amen.